because if you change that question and you ask me, well, what's your favorite to broadcast? Basketball is number one. Again, the flow of the game, the stoppages of the game still lend itself to anecdotes and stories and other things like that. But for the most part, game flows, and you don't have to memorize 8 million numbers either. And once you got the numbers down, it's pretty much in your hands to run it how you see fit. After that is probably baseball, just because of my experience with it. To be completely honest with you, though, I like calling soccer, at least as a play-by-play guy, a little bit more than I like calling football. And it's interesting because I don't have as much experience. The terminology isn't necessarily there. I've gotten better. Thankfully, I've gotten to listen to you and some other guys, obviously, who've been surrounded by the sport their whole life. But the nice thing about soccer is because the style of broadcaster that I am, being that I've done so much baseball, it is very kind of reminiscent of that, because soccer allows you to really, especially in the TV medium, and I always say this, like the number two shines on the TV side. Radio, it's all play-by-play guy. Number two, when I got Dan Stickrat sitting next to me and I have an encyclopedia of soccer knowledge, right? It's like an Energizer bunny. Just wind them up and watch them go. So soccer is very fun because it's almost kind of like a casual, like you're riding a bike. And it gives you the opportunity to really dive into the storytelling aspect of broadcasting. But at the same exact time, much like baseball, I know when it's time to shut up and lock in and make the call, because we understand there are certain areas of the field or the pitch where things happen. So very high level competitive soccer, especially like doing Davenport University this year when they were playing Grand Valley and some other teams that are pretty solid in the Division II ranks. One of the more exciting sports that it's grown on me a lot. Yeah, it's not my favorite, but I do see where maybe people might overlook the game of soccer simply maybe because they see the score on the scoreboard and they go, well, how can you have any fun watching a 1-0 game? Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
So just an FYI, I did hit the live button. So we are currently live on YouTube right now. Good. Just an FYI.
All right.
I figured let's test some of the live aspect of this too. So it just an FYI. Not that makes a difference in how we communicate or talk, but I figure why not, kind of just open this up a little bit. So welcome in if anyone's watching on YouTube. We appreciate it. This new show, Inside the Game podcast. I'm Jonathan Turner. That's Nathan Wangler. Obviously the plan of this show is to dive into the game of soccer, the game of broadcasting. Not says the game, but broadcasters as a whole. Kind of give you a little bit of a what I would say like a look behind the microphone, along with inside the game. We'll have guests on and things like that. And the question I just asked Nathan is where is soccer, on his list of games? And I don't know if you actually put into a perspective like what. You might have danced around the question, kind of like a politician does. Did you actually answer the question about where is soccer on your list? What is the number one sport that you love to call and love to go to or watch, consume?
Oh, they're different though.
No, this is like a wrong answer. It's not like anyone's gonna like crucify you because you said it's not soccer.
It has to be football.
It has to be football.
Not the call.
Okay, so football is number one.
Okay.
Number one. Okay, and that's both calling it and consuming it.
Wrong. That is consuming
it. Just consuming it. Okay, yes. Fair enough. And then, let's just talk about consuming first. So football, what is second?
Second on that list would have to be basketball.
Basketball. Okay, right. So, and is it, and now when we say football, is it all football or is it just like NFL, college, high school, like what, No,
it's the game itself. It could be any level. I think there's much like any other sport, there's a language to it, and I really get into that aspect of it.
Okay, that's fair.
My dad was a coach and everything else. So, anyways,
no, that's fair to know. I think it's important to also acknowledge. Okay, so then second is basketball, and again, that could be any basketball. Doesn't again the same thing, or is there like college?
Well, if it's a Tuesday night game in Phoenix on a random January night, it's probably not something I'm going to be too heavily invested in. But
so you're saying college basketball
pretty much all levels. Yeah, all levels. Just,
all right. And then what is third?
Third on that list is baseball. Again, another sport that I grew up with. Yep. Another sport that I've called a lot of. Again, you might think it's slow and boring. but I do think there are a lot of moments where, it can almost be like it's the one game that really has a monopoly over the summer. It's built its reputation around, you kind of go out to have a picnic and an outing with the family, and there just so happens to be a game going on. And I love that aspect of it. So baseball, another sport that I grew up around. And then fourth on that list, right? We're going to do tied for fourth, hockey and soccer. And it's tough because at a high level, both sports are very entertaining to watch. I love consuming hockey. But the truth is again, the more high level soccer I've been exposed to, the more that I feel like that at least taste, that preference has changed a little bit, but it comes with more exposure.
For sure. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, so you obviously have this, so soccer is not number one. And the reason why I thought that was important to ask that question, Nate, is because, if you were to ask me the same question, I would tell you something different as well. Go ahead and ask me.
What is your hierarchy? I'm assuming it's soccer number one simply because of your background in the sport. I mean, it's tough to be a referee and run an association and do this, that, and the other thing, and build a company off of it if soccer is not number one. But I'm interested to see what the differentiating factor is between, if there is one, between consuming and calling. I'm assuming I know what your unanimous number one is. I don't know where everything else falls on that list, but certainly you're not just a soccer guy with everything you got going on over at Oakland.
Yeah. So, so first and foremost, soccer is not my number one sport to consume. Yeah. So it's not. I mean,
really?
Yeah. I mean, now there are some games and there are some environments that I will love to watch soccer in. Right. So World Cup, right. When the U.S. men's national playing Mexico, right. When that's happening, right. Those games, I will stop what I'm doing to go do it. Because I think of it like this, right. If you're talking about a sporting event or something that you're going to stop and you're going to like rearrange your schedule around. All right. I don't do that for anything but football. Like, I mean that. I mean, and that's not and American football. I don't want to like come off saying it's a football. No, American football. I literally every single time there's a Lions game, I rearrange my schedule to watch that game. Now I'm not watching every NFL game. I'm watching, Now, and again, and if we think about in Michigan, and because I grew up here in Michigan, you think about the teams that you root for, right? Back in the 90s, I was rooting heavily for the Red Wings because they were really, really good. They were winning Stanley Cups. The Tigers were terrible. The Pistons were really good during the 90s, right? And early 2000s. There were some moments in there where they weren't good. But so I would rearrange my schedule to watch a basketball playoff game or rearrange my schedule to watch a hockey playoff game. But consistently through my life, it's been football. Right now, if you talk about from the standpoint of loving the game, I don't love the game of football the same way I love soccer. There's not the same love. There isn't. And I would imagine there's a lot of sports fans out there that probably have the same kind of mindset, right? Where I love watching football, but my love for soccer is so far greater than that of football, right? I understand it. I played it. I coached it. Right. But I think a lot of it for me is I live soccer. Like I live it. I live soccer as a job, as my career. I live it from a broadcasting standpoint. So for me, I don't need to watch it and consume it when I'm on my free time. It's almost like I'm working. Right. So it's like for me, I don't consume a lot of sports anymore, to be fair, at all. And a lot of that's because I'm so engulfed in sports now with my role that I almost feel like I'm still working and I want to be able to take a break, from everything.
Well, well, the biggest thing is, and it's interesting that you say that. One of the reasons, and I know we were chatting on our last show or our last, practice round, about, if the United States wants to go on to win a World Cup and how do we catch up to the rest of the countries in the world, and the fact that we're 30 years behind. Football, there's such a community feel to the sport of football, and I think that's kind of what drives the popularity of the sport itself. I had someone yesterday, and it's funny when you go to family functions, like you run into, especially, when you get into relationships or marriages, and then you run into in-laws and everything like that, you're going to meet some interesting people in life. And one of the individuals that I was with yesterday at another Christmas thing, not a sports person at all. Just doesn't understand the concept of it. He's like, why does any of it matter? What, at the end of the day, what happens? If the Vikings go out and beat the whoever's, on a Thursday night, how does that impact anybody? And I'm like, well, first off, I'm like, I think sports has always been cornerstone to society. Like, in order to have a thriving society, you need sports, right? Like Plato said
you
that.
need something competitive that people can get behind, right?
Right.
And they say
yeah.
you always need a good villain, right?
Exactly. And so that's that's the big first thing. But the second thing is also like this craving that we all have for community. And being a part of one. Some people go to church, some people go to the different group meetings, some people go to sports because it's a sense of community and a sense of belonging. The only thing is like in the United States, and again, I find it interesting that you say that, there's a lot of different spaces for sports fandom. It's not hard. Like you can, the guy next to you, the guy who lives to my right and lives to my left, I'm sure they're both Lions fans. I'm sure we could both sit down and have a conversation. How many people can you walk up to and talk about talk about the Columbus Crew and how they're doing this year? There's not going to be a ton of people, so it's generating that community. That's the biggest thing for soccer, is growing that community of people that enjoy the sport to the point to where they're willing to have those conversations in barbershops or in bars or anywhere else along those lines. Because it's one thing to enjoy watching it and consuming it, but if that's not, it doesn't give you that sense of that overwhelming sense of community, and this is us, and it's us against the world, much in the same way that the sport of football does. And I get it at a very basic level in the United States, but that's another reason why I think the show would be something that's important, is to just try again to be another part of that machine that is trying to get this community together to get this sport to that next level.
Well, I think honestly I took heat for the comment about how we're 30 years away, and how, and I know that a lot of the people that were chiming in on social media in regards to like TikTok and things like that, the comment about, well, if we want to win, we should be adopting the way the game is being played across the pond and across the world. And I think they maybe misunderstood what I was saying. If the reality is that if Europeans or anywhere across this world took American football, for example, and tried to play it exactly the same way, the exact same style, it doesn't, like Dan Campbell's way of playing football is not something that every team in the league can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You just can't, right? First off, I don't know if there's a reason why there's so many players that are hurt this year on the Lions. It's not because it's just a fluke. It's because they're every play they're going so hard that you're ultimately that grit and that toughness is going to end up kind of being a weakness for your team. You're going to end up hurting yourselves. You're going to end up hurting more people along the way because you're going balls to the wall for the entire game. My point and my perspective about this is that if you're trying to adopt a way of playing soccer or playing the world's game, you've got to find a way to take the pieces that you believe will be successful for your team or for your country and make those work within your system of play, your style of play.
Take their blueprint and make it our own.
Yeah, you just can't take the we're just gonna play possession.
Right.
Okay.
And if you can't, right. And it's funny because I was reading those TikTok comments. You can't fight fire with gasoline. We don't have fire with fire.
We don't have the same skill level. And I say this a lot. I ask this, right. I make this point a lot. We have a lot of good players, a lot of really good players. And I've asked this question on the air. I've asked this question to people who are in the soccer world and not in the soccer world. And I'll ask this question to you. Argentina, right? Won the last World Cup, right? Argentina. Lionel Messi getting his first ever World Cup victory, right? Take one player from the United States, okay? I don't care who it is. Which one of those players would start on Argentina? Which one? And there's your answer, right? But if you took, how many players from Argentina would start on the United States? You know what I mean? So that's the thing. And I remember this because as a former high school coach, high school is nothing compared to that of the international ranks. But the way in which you win games those all kind of they translate. They do. They work the same way. You don't have talent, you can't win games against teams that are talented than you, more talented than you. It's really tough. And you have to ask yourself this question: well, how do I put myself in a position to win against teams that have way more talent than me? Well, you have to be creative. You have to change your formation. You have to adopt a new way of playing in order to, maybe you're playing very defensive and you play a transitional game where you're only trying to just score goals after they make a mistake. Like that's the way because there's so many different things that go into decision making, right? And our biggest flaw in the United States, to be fair, it comes down to decision making. Skill. I mean, to take a player who's already got a talent and technical skills, put them into a new environment and train them, to pass a ball. It's not like it's not rocket science. The reality is, when you're being pressured, it's the 1v1 battles. It's the 2v2 battles. It's the 1 versus 2 on the outside of the field. Like, those battles are where soccer games are won and lost, and that is the area that the United States struggles in. We struggle in the 1v1s. We struggle in the 1v2s. We struggle in the 2v2s. That's where we struggle. That's where we have a hard time winning soccer games. It's not hard to pass a ball, but it's hard to pass the ball under pressure. It's hard to pass the ball when you are about to be pressured and it's, defensively their team is doing something to mess with your shape or to mess with what you want to do. Those are all things that we struggle in. Goalkeeping has always been a strength of the United States. Why? Think about that. Why are our goalkeepers very good? Because, again, typically tough, gritty, right? Fundamentals are always there. Goalkeeping is one of the things we've always been really good about. Tim Howard, you think about that, the goalkeepers that we've had over the years. Brad Guzan, I don't know if he's the best goalkeeper or not, but again, we've typically had pretty good goalkeepers along the way. Casey Keller back in the day, Tony Meola, they have not been terrible goalies. But we struggle offensively. I mean, Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan are great United States attackers, right? Christian Pulisic is another really good product, but you need like 30 of them, to be fair, right? You need a ton of them.
And it's funny because you mentioned on the last podcast, you're talking about Herb Brooks and those, going out in Lake Placid and beating, the Soviet Union. It wasn't that they played the exact game that the Soviets did. They didn't copy him step for step, but what Herb did in his genius was that he took pages out of their playbook and he made it their own. And anywhere you look at great improvements, I feel like this is universal. It's not just sports either. I mean, look at freaking car manufacturing. I know you're a Detroit guy, okay? So I'm sorry ahead of time for saying this, all right? But like the Japanese took our model for making cars. They took our blueprint and they said, well, let's turn around and let's make it better. And then we got brands like Honda, and we got other things in different places, and multiple different countries have done this, so stealing is very much a part of the art of winning, especially in sports. So I think for the Americans, taking a page out of the training and the preparation and the all the other things that maybe these European countries do to develop players, that's fine. But trying to play the game exactly the way they do, you're playing into their hands. They understand how the game is played their way. It's how they grew up playing it. So I think, being able to steal stuff here or there is really good. That's a part of winning. That's a part of turning a team and a franchise and a program around. But at the same exact time, you can't play exactly the way that they do, because you're right. We don't have the firepower to match up with that.
Yeah, and again, there's many ways to pull back and peel back the layers of why we aren't successful on the world stage is what we should be. I think first and foremost, we're so used to winning here that the general public, who doesn't really quite get the game of soccer to the levels that maybe someone who's been doing it for a long time would understand, they want us to win. Yeah, the expectation is winning, and you can't. And again, winning can come in a lot of different forms. At the end of the day, you have to win, by one more point. I think even Dan Campbell made a comment here. Like, I use Dan Campbell because it's the Lions are where they are right now. But he's like, I don't care if we win every football game by 1 point, as long as we win. It does not matter to me how many points we score, as long as we win by 1 point. We win the game. And the reality is that it's exactly what we want to do. We want to win, and if it doesn't have to be pretty.
Right.
Ugly soccer, wins championships. I mean, Vermont just won an ugly goal.
Right.
Talk about that goal and think about
right.
it, obviously in a golden goal fashion against Marshall in the NCAA tournament in the College Cup, and they win their first ever national championship. They did that
Right.
in I would say that it was an ugly goal because again the ball was not if that play happens in the first 10 minutes of the game, that's not being scored. Why is that happening? Because the player is tired. They've been playing for 95 plus minutes. They've played 30 games of the course of a season, and it's coming down to that one moment, and that it's an ugly goal. It's a great goal for for Vermont to win a national championship, but it's if you think about pretty goals, a defender falling down on a ball over the top, and the Vermont attacker wins the ball and just dribbles past a goalkeeper. I mean, it's not a world class goal, right? It's a defensive miscue that leads to an offensive, finish, and that's soccer. It's soccer
Right.
in its purest form because
Right.
how many times have you seen in hockey, right, where you put a player right in front of the goalkeeper, and all his whole job is just to block the eyesight of the goalkeeper so that when a puck's coming through, he can't see it.
Yep.
Right. I think it was Thomas Holmstrom made a whole career out of it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, I mean, you have players that just sit there right in front of the goalie and all they do is just block eyesight. Right.
Right.
And why is that? Because they want ugly goals to go through, just ugly goals. So I think that when we talk about the United States men's national team and what their success can be, and we'll dive into a lot of this during our shows. And obviously, as camps come up and as the team starts to get ready for the 2026 World Cup, I think there's a lot of high expectations for this team to go into the United States and do this World Cup in 2026 and make some noise.
Right.
They're gonna be disappointed. They're gonna be disappointed. I'll stand here today and tell you that we are not going to make it to a World Cup final in 2026.
No.
And to be fair, I would argue we would have a tough time even qualifying, if we had to qualify right now.
Yeah.
Well,
you hear a lot of the talking heads bring this up about this team. And the other thing I would add too is like it's doable to get better and be able to compete on the world level. I mean, we're doing it in rugby. We caught on to rugby so late. There's so many other countries have been playing that sport at a high level for a long time, and now we're finally getting there and we're winning medals. So don't tell me that it's not possible to do in men's soccer, because I know it is. But I think that the biggest issue, especially under new leadership for USMNT, is kind of like we were talking about earlier, right? Cultivating a culture. Why when you played Mexico the last time, why is it that we don't have our best players out on the pitch? On the road in Mexico. By the way, that rivalry is more heated now. I feel like it's reached a fevered pitch more now than it ever has been, simply because of the way that the U.S. men's national team has handled that squad over the course of the last 5-6 years. I mean, cup winners and Tres Acero and stuff and everything that they've done, especially on home turf. Why are our best players not out there? Why are they still playing for this team or for that team? Is there not enough of a culture and a draw to listen? You're playing Mexico, like
yeah, but soccer's the only sport in the world where during a regular season of play, you're actually being asked to go someplace else, right? There's not think about this in basketball. There's not where do you go in basketball? Other than
the Olympics is pretty much done away with that. They don't
right? So then you think about other sports, right? With baseball, doesn't happen, right? Hockey, it kind of happens. I think, there's some things that happen in hockey land. But probably more the youth level of hockey or like the younger levers. But soccer is a unique sport in that way, where you're playing your MLS season, you're playing a USL championship season, you're playing these seasons, and then in the middle of it, you're being asked to go to your home country to play in a 3-game set, over the course of 15 or 20 days, and then you're back to your team.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons as to why a player wouldn't be on a roster for a national team game. It could be injury, it could be because of the loan situation. There are so many different variations and variables involved in soccer, which is weird. And obviously those are things we can all dive into. But there are not all U.S. men's national team versus Mexico games are created equal, right? And I bet you if you were to ask like head coaches, okay, would you rather play a men's national team game against Mexico or U.S.? Would you like to play that versus just playing somebody else? I bet you they'd probably tell you they won't play somebody else. And the reason why is because in those games they get so heated and emotional that you're going to get people hurt, wear and tear on the body. Is it worth it? Right? Because there's someone that was not talking about rivalry games specifically back when I was coaching. My players loved them. They loved them because they got to go out there and beat each other up, right? They go win against your rival. Those games became more important than other games,
Right.
games that had more meaning behind them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's that's the thing that I would say is the rivalry games are great. But do they mean more than the next? And there are some, like when you talk about qualifying, of course they mean something. But you're playing in the World Cup, of course it means something. But a random Mexico USA game in January means nothing. It means nothing. Obviously, Nathan, this was us kind of coming on here today again. We're testing out kind of like our setup and getting ready for January the 6th. Where can you watch and tune into this? It'll be available on our YouTube channel on National Soccer Network, be on Roku TV and on Roku. So if you have a Roku TV, you can tune into this on Roku starting on January the 6th every day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And you'll be able to see our YouTube shorts and TikToks. If TikTok's still a thing, I don't. We'll find that out sooner than later.
For now.
We'll also be able to listen to this on audio only on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Basically, anywhere you listen or get your podcasts. It's going to be like this. It's going to be kind of off the cuff. It's going to kind of be like, hey, what are we talking about today? We'll have some things that are segmented and regimented, but for the most part, we'll dive into things like this and dive into like what's going on in our lives and things like that. And I know, Nathan, you got to run because you have not one but two games to call here today. We on the network, we have two Major Arena Soccer League games tonight here on the platform. So you can tune in to those games. Both games kick off at 7 o'clock tonight, as well as 9 p.m. We have, just kind of tell you the schedule real quick here. I say busy day, but busiest, I would say, is the word. Two games, not too busy. But tonight we've got the Harrisburg Heat taking on Baltimore Blast. They're in Baltimore. That game's actually at 7:30, so I lied about the kickoff time. And then the other game is at 9 o'clock. It's Texas Outlaws are playing against the Chihuahua Savages in Mexico. So speaking of Mexico, will be a game tonight in Mexico on the platform. So you can watch those games on our YouTube channel, National Soccer Network TV, or Roku TV. National Soccer Network. So both those games are available tonight, as well as on demand later on. So there you go.
It should be fun too. I think the Savages are on a roll in the MASL. So
they did win.
I enjoy Arena League soccer, man. I want to go see one of those games here pretty soon. It looks entertaining. Probably not in Mexico, but anyway, one of the closer locations would be cool.
No question. Well, hey man, go enjoy the rest of your Friday. We're gonna give it back some time. We appreciate anyone that stopped by. Again, this was just us testing it around. I think we had 32 people kind of tuning in here there, Nathan. So for not marketing it, just kind of putting it out to the world. But we're gonna talk about the game, we're gonna talk about life and all that kind of stuff and so much more right here on Inside the Game, the podcast. I'm Jonathan Turner, that's Nathan Wangler. We'll be back here launching the show on January the 6th. Also, something else happened a couple of years ago on January the 6th, but we won't talk about that.
No. This is happy news. A new January the 6th.
Well, anyways, we appreciate you stopping by. Until next time.